Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining our Sustainable Activism Webinar. My name is Lisa Levinson. I'm the Director of In Defense of Animals Sustainable Activism Campaign, and I'm here to guide you and just for our session today. And when you come into the session, if you could have your video and your microphone muted, that would be very helpful for us. And today we're very excited to have Tobias Leenaert with us, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a little bit more information about him. So Tobias Leenaert is a longtime speaker, trainer, and strategist. He is also the co-founder of the Belgian organization EVA, Ethical Vegetarian Alternative, the first vegetarian vegan organization in the world to receive structural funding from its government. Under his management, EVA launched a successful campaign that ended with the city of Ghent becoming the first city in the world to officially support a weekly vegetarian day. Recently, Tobias left his position at EVA to work more fully as a speaker, writer, and consultant for vegan advocates and organizations. Passionate about effectiveness, Tobias writes regularly for his blog, The Vegan Strategist, and is currently writing a book on vegan strategy. Tobias lives in Ghent, Belgium, with his partner, 2 dogs, and 7 cats. So it's my great pleasure to introduce to you Tobias, who is with us today. And I will be guiding the webinar in a logistical capacity, so I'm going to turn it over to him. But if you have any questions, feel free to put them into the chat box, and we will be later in the webinar offering a Q&A session. And so we're very excited for what's to come. And Tobias, let me go ahead and pin you there. So hopefully everyone can see Tobias. Oops, hold on one second. I'm not hearing you though. Let me, how about this? There we go. Tobias?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
I was muted. Yes.
All
right. Shall I start?
Yes, okay. You can. We can see you.
And I'll share my slides here. Okay. So let me just see how to do that. Share screen. Share, and then can you see my slides now?
Yes, we can.
Yeah.
We can see your slides, and we also see an image of yourself.
All right. Okay, so I'll talk for like 25, 30 minutes or something, and then if you have questions, you can ask them. I'm not looking straight in the camera because I have a weird setup with the phone and the computer here. So I call this this little talk "Have a Little Patience," because I think maybe one of the most important things, if you want to be like sustainable, if you don't want to despair, if you want to keep on going on, then patience is very necessary. And if you talk about sustainability, and if you talk about like what is the thing that you can run into, I think that may be different for everybody, for every one of us. And I'll just talk about myself a very little bit. So as Lisa said, I founded an organization called EVA in 2000, Ethical Vegetarian Alternative, and I kind of worked for that for 15 years. I was the director of it, and this organization was my baby. And after 15 years, I was, I think we were quite successful, or we still are, but after 15 years, I had a burnout. This is not me, but it could as well be me. I had a burnout, in my case, of leading people. I found it very challenging to lead a team. And in my case, has to do a lot with like, well, a basic like uncertainty, like how do I ever know for sure that I can make this decision, and how can I like criticize this person if I'm not sure that whatever. So a lot of uncertainty, and this was very hard for me. And in the end, I stopped. I left my position, and I just work without a team now. I just work on myself. So that's kind of like my brief story, my encounter with unsustainability, because this was unsustainable for me. And now I feel a lot better writing, blogging, speaking, doing things on myself, and not having to lead. So I'm going to give you a couple of tips, like 10 tips to be sustainable. And so part of that will be to be patient. So this first graph it's in all my slides, and I'm going to explain it a little bit because it's not immediately clear. But you can see two dimensions on this graph. You can see dimension about the frequency that people eat meat in the bottom, horizontally. And that dimension goes from like being a normal omnivore to meatless Monday to being like a semi or a demi-vegetarian to a vegetarian, all the way up to a vegan. And so that's the behavioral frequency. So that's the behavioral axis. How are people behaving? How much meat or not are they eating, or animal products? And then the other aspect, or the other axis, is the vertical axis, and that's the motivation. And there you can see that people can have no reason to eat what they eat. They can eat a bit or more vegan or more vegetarian for variation reasons. They can do it for health reasons, for environmental reasons, and for animal reasons. And then you see all these like angry faces, and that means that represents that in the vegan movement or in the animal rights movement, we're actually not really happy with everything except for vegan for the animals. Vegan for the animals is like the ideal of most people in the movement, at least in the animal rights movement. And everything that's not vegan for the animals is not ideal to us. And I think if we look at it that way, it can be very frustrating to advocate for animals, because like we want people to care about animals and we want them to be vegan. And that's a double demand. That's a high ask. And when people don't meet our demand, we can get like frustrated and impatient, and we say like, why don't they see it? Why don't they understand it, etc. And so I'm going to try to explain two things. First of all, we can have a vegan world even while we're not asking people to go vegan right away. And secondly, we don't need to ask people to care about the animals right away. So indirectly, we will end up at the place like where the heart is, like people caring about animals and being vegan for that reason. But we can do that, we can get there, and I think we can get there faster indirectly. So by not asking to go vegan, or by not only asking to go vegan, and by not always talking about the animals. So I'll talk about these two aspects. So the first thing and the first tip is any reduction that people do, any kind of meat reduction is great. And if you accept that, I think that's already like one reason to feel less stressed and less desperate. Because what I want to tell you is that like if there's many people reducing, then we'll be able to tip the system and go to that vegan world. So this is the gluten-free phenomenon, which is like very important in every country that I've been to, and I've been to quite a lot of countries now. It's all over the world in the last 5 years. Some people stopped eating gluten. Gluten is the new Al-Qaeda. And you know that there's people on the one hand who have to really avoid gluten, or they have a very serious problem. They have a condition. They have celiac disease. And then on the other hand, there's people who like think they have to avoid gluten. And I call them gluten-free fakers. Not meant to be judgmental, but they don't really have to avoid them, and so they only avoid them like in moderation. And I found like a comment of a woman on Facebook, and she said like, well, all these fakers, they make it difficult for me to explain that for me, being gluten-free is a matter of life and death. And maybe you could recognize that as a vegan, it becomes sometimes difficult to explain what veganism is because of the people who are not so strict in it. Because, for instance, when somebody eats fish and they tell a waiter in a restaurant that like they're a vegetarian, and then the waiter says to you, well, you eat fish, right? Because he met somebody who eats fish. So it becomes a bit complicated to explain it. But the advantage, because of that all these fakers created, was that, this woman said, was that on the other hand, she has a much bigger choice in products now. So because of all these people not really being gluten-free, but because there being many more of them, and because of them asking for products, she has a lot bigger choice in products now. So what happened was the demand of a big group of fakers created a big choice. And that's the same thing that we see in the vegan movement. You have a small group of vegans, a bigger group of vegetarians, but a much bigger group of meat reducers. And it's this group that drives the demand. It's this group that like asks for products, and it's this group that makes it viable, economically viable for producers to care for them and to cater to them. Okay, so what's important is that the reducers make it easier for everyone to go vegan. And if we have enough reducers, enough people reducing enough, we will reach, I think, a tipping point. Now, what we have today is that compassion costs too much. Compassion is too costly for most people. If you want to feel compassionate and if you want to put that compassion into practice, then the consequences are very high. The consequences in terms of your behavior. So this is the way it still is now for most people. If the alternatives are low, the alternatives to meat are not good, they're not available, they're expensive, etc. So they're not generally, the availability is not very good, then the required effort is high. And we have to go to a situation like this, that when the alternatives are everywhere and they're good and they're tasty and they're affordable, then the required effort, the effort that we have to ask of people, goes down. So what we do, there's a strange noise on the, I think there's a UFO or something on the line. So it's gone. So what we're doing here is lowering the bar. Lowering the bar means that we make it easier for people to jump. So if we make the bar lower, people can jump over it more easily and they don't need all this motivation. And we can lower the bar so much that maybe in the end, people don't need any motivation at all to go vegan. And if I ask people like, what do you think of that? I know there's many people who wouldn't entirely like that on some level because, well, exactly because we want people to go vegan for the animals. So the good news is that any reason to reduce animal products consumption or to go vegan is okay. Let me explain that. So we have different arguments, and I distinguish moral and non-moral arguments, ethical and the unethical, not unethical, but like they don't have like any moral aspect to them. So for instance, health is a non-moral reason to go vegan or to reduce your meat consumption, or the fact that maybe you have a vegan girlfriend or boyfriend and you do it for them, it's also, ethics are not involved. And in our movement, we attach a lot of importance to the moral reasons, the moral arguments. We want to convince people to do it for the right reasons, for the animals, for the moral reasons. And we do that because we think that is the way social movements work. Like the abolition of slavery, we believe that it was abolished because of moral outrage. And that played certainly a role. But the thing is that there were other factors too that we forget about. For instance, this is the steam machine, and the steam machine made it possible for people to, for slaveholders, for instance, to do certain things more cheaply with machines than with slaves, because slaves have to be fed and they have to be housed, and there's a cost related to them, right? So if you could change them or replace slaves by a machine, obviously that had a big impact in this fight against slavery. Now, what is important and what we forget in the movement is that, well, let me say it this way, we usually think of behavior change like this. We change somebody's attitude and therefore their behavior will change. And sometimes it happens like that, but most of the time there's an attitude behavior gap. So people change their attitude, but they don't necessarily change their behavior. People know that eating animals is wrong, but they don't necessarily stop eating meat, for instance. But what works too, and what is ignored in many social movements and also in ours, is that behavior can influence attitude. So that means that like people can start eating vegan, not entirely, but now and then for whatever reason. And by doing this, this has an impact on their attitude and their beliefs. So an example of something where behavior preceded attitude change is when seatbelt laws were introduced, when people had to wear seatbelts. They didn't like it, but they had to wear them. And they were actually against it because many people were against it because it was a hassle, or they thought so. But they had to do it because it was a law. And then years later, after the law was introduced, they asked people, what do you think of this law? And most people said, this is a good law. So their attitude had changed because they had been doing it for a while. So what happened was that probably maybe they saw that it wasn't actually that much of a hassle at all, or they thought like, okay, this is actually safer, why wouldn't I do it, etc. So attitude change followed behavior change. And this can happen in our movement too. This does happen in our movement too. Like for instance, I've heard a lot of stories, and maybe you have too, of people who start being vegan for health reasons, and they don't care about animals, or they haven't thought about it. And then all of a sudden they start to care about animals, and they become even animal rights ethical vegans. So if you look at this is the normal way that we think. The more people care about animals, the more people will eat vegan. But it also works this way. The more people eat vegan, the more people will care about animals. So behavior first and then attitude. So it works both ways. So, but the thing that I want to tell you is that like you don't have to despair when people don't care about animals right away, because this is something that can grow with behavior change. And we don't have to despair when people are like health vegans, because they can evolve towards being ethical vegans. So the two principles are this: as the choices increase, becoming stricter gets easier. So more and more reducers create more choice, and it becomes easier for everybody to go vegan. And secondly, as people eat vegan for whatever reason, their defense goes down. They say like, okay, this is okay food, this is tasty, I can eat this. And a door opens, their heart opens, compassion can grow in them because they have nothing to defend against anymore. So I hope this is clear. I can't see your faces. I can't see if you're like saying like, oh my God, this is confusing. So I hope it's clear. So these are the first 2 points. So the first point was like reducers are awesome. We don't have to despair if people don't go vegan. We can like be very happy when there's a lot of people reducing. And secondly, if they don't care about the animals, that's fine too. That can come, that can develop and evolve. So the third point is that this is the hardest struggle ever. And this doesn't sound very motivational, but actually it is. It means that because this fight is so hard, it means that it will go slow. We have to just accept that it goes slow. We cannot expect progress very, very fast. So this has some elements, this third point. Why is this the hardest struggle ever? Well, because first of all, very obviously, the protesters are not the victims. Okay, the animals that are the victims of this whole animal consumption thing are not in the fight together with us. So this is Chicken Run, where chickens take up the fight and liberate themselves. This is unfortunately never going to happen in the animal rights movement. We won't have the help of the chickens or the pigs or the cows. Okay, so that makes a difference, because in the fight against slavery or in the women's liberation movement, the people, the victims themselves, were of course a very important, a crucial part, the most crucial part of the fight. We don't have that. We have to speak for others. We have to speak for the animals because they can't speak themselves. Secondly, there's a very high dependence on animal products, and I think we underestimate that. We underestimate that we are trying to change something that most people in the world do 3 times a day, which is eating animal products. If you do something 3 times a day, every day, that's a very, very ingrained and very important habit to you, something that you're very, very dependent on. And changing that is going to be hard. So this dependency manifests itself or the obviousness of it manifests itself in Melanie Joy's 3 ends of justification. Animal products are not normal, natural, and necessary. I think you know this. They're also nice, they're tasty. So they're so omnipresent, they're so natural, so normal. And because we do it 3 times a day, because we eat animal products 3 times a day, so it's going to take a lot to change that. And moral arguments are not going to be enough for that. 95% of the people are not on board yet. So this is, again, this may be different than other movements, like probably in the fight against slavery, there were more than 5% of the people against slavery. I mean, pretty sure of that. Here we have a situation where we are starting with a very small minority. Okay, so that's not easy. It's a young movement, just a couple of decades old. It's about food, changing food habits, and that's notoriously difficult. In terms of behavior change, changing food behavior is very difficult. And meat eating is a very ancient habit, so that makes it in itself difficult to change also. So this may sound, like I said, may sound depressing, but it's not meant to be, because it's just explaining why it has to be slow. It will be slow. And I think even in spite of all these like factors that make it very difficult, we have made really good progress. I'm coming back to that later. The fourth tip is that it's not just about you. So we are not responsible personally for veganizing everybody around us. And I use a metaphor of people as a bucket. If you see people as a bucket of like compassion. I mean, it's an empty bucket maybe at first, or not a full bucket. And the bucket slowly fills, drip by drip, with drops of compassion. And anything that happens to people adds some drops to that bucket. And when we talk to them, some drops are added. When they see something in the media, some drops are added. When I talk to other people, drops are added, and we don't know how full this bucket is. And at a certain point, it's going to be full and it's going to be overflowing. And then people change. But the important thing is to realize that we never know how full the bucket is. And it's not just us that is filling it. It's many people together. It's all kinds of influences together. So don't despair when you weren't able to like veganize somebody, or don't get frustrated. There should be 5, actually, the numbering is wrong. Believe in people. I think I see a lot of misanthropy in our movement, or a lot of, at least, people saying like, oh, people are not good creatures and they should disappear from the planet, etc. And well, it depends on what you look at. It depends on what you focus on. So my cat is doing a bit strange here. So if you focus on all the bad that people do, then it's very easy to say like people are a species that should just disappear. But you might as well focus on all the wonderful things that we do. And there's never been, in the history of this planet, there's never been a species that was so invested in helping other people and even helping other species. So there's millions and millions of people involved in the nonprofit sector, and they're helping other people all the time. They're helping the people who are physically challenged or mentally challenged, the poor people, etc. We're trying to help everybody. It's not ideal, but it is in any case a very big operation of people helping other people, and that's very wonderful. Because a couple of years ago, in cosmic terms, we were just primates in the trees. We're still primates, but we were like just hanging out in trees, and we were not doing anything except for eating nuts and playing and fighting or whatever. And so now we have this consciousness, that this empathy, that we want to help people, and we do it very structurally. And I think that's a very beautiful thing. So that's what I focus on. I don't focus on all the bad things that people do. I focus on the good people, and I focus on, even if I see bad people, I just try to find the good in them and just consider them as people who have not learned something yet that we had the opportunity to learn faster. Okay. The fifth is to try to be less judgmental, and I'm not saying that to like teach you a lesson or anything, but because being judgmental is tiring, and if you're not judgmental, it's much more relaxing for yourself also. So some tips. It's not easy to be not judgmental, because we see all this misery around us, and it's very easy to judge that. First of all, we don't know people. We don't know what's happening to them. We don't know their situation. We can't judge them if we don't like have all their situation in front of us. We know that everybody's different. They may have gone through a completely different education and upbringing and childhood, or maybe in a different culture. So it's really hard to say that what applies to us also should apply to them, and that what we do, they should do too. We can expect some things, of course, from people, but it's hard to just say that, well, everybody should do as we do, because they may not have had the chance. It's important to remember that we were a meat eater once, most of us, and that we don't suffer from what I call vegan amnesia. It's important to remember that we're not perfect, and that we may be vegan and we may be doing all these kind of things for the animals, but there may be, well, blind spots, or there may be things where we are not so good, or where we, like, for instance, well, it's for my work, but I fly around the world a lot of the time, and I know that creates a lot of greenhouse gas emissions. It's far from perfect. And I have a worse impact on the environment than most meat eaters, I'm sure. People can do other great things. So it's the other way around. If you see like non-vegans, they can be doing wonderful things for other people or for the environment or whatever. So I'm not judging people when they're not vegan. I'm just saying, like, well, I don't know what other great things these people are doing that I'm not doing. Maybe they have a bigger positive impact on the world than I have. And lastly, judgmentalism, or being judgmental, is ineffective. It's ineffective for yourself. It's not sustainable. And it's ineffective in the sense that when people feel judged, they probably will not be more likely to change. It creates a distance between you and them. So if you can avoid judgment, that would be good. Anger is another emotion that's often not very productive. I know that many people in the movement, in the animal rights vegan movement, think that anger is something that drives them, outrage, something that gives them energy, and that we should be angry, because if we're not angry, then something is wrong with us, or we're not paying attention. I think anger is most of the time not very productive. Anger is something that burns you out. It's something that, like, if you are possessed, let's say, by anger, or controlled by anger, you will be less rational, you will be less convincing, you will be less patient. There's all kind of things that will be less ideal in the course of a conversation or a meeting when you are angry. So I think it's very important to be aware of anger and to not put it on a pedestal, to not think that it's such a great thing. I mean, it's very natural to be angry, but it's very natural to be angry at all the things we see around us that are so bad and so horrible. But it would be good if we can channel that anger towards something better, and we can use the energy of the anger to make positive change. The 7 is empathy versus compassion, and this is a distinction that Paul Bloom, a famous psychologist, makes. Empathy, he's written a book called Against Empathy, and he's against empathy because empathy is about feeling other people's pain, and because you feel their pain, you well, first of all, it's emotionally very heavy, and also you can make decisions that are not very rational because you're so involved in their emotion. And he puts that against, so Paul Bloom does that, he puts it against compassion. Compassion is that you care deeply, but you don't feel the pain of the other people. We don't have to, and I think that's a good idea. We don't have to feel the pain of other creatures. I mean, it doesn't help anybody. It just burns us out. We can be very aware of their pain, and we can care deeply about them and try to solve it and help them, but we can stand firm and be positive, and we don't have to feel the pain that they feel. There's no obligation. There's nothing noble about that. Number 8 is to be grateful for your vulnerability and for being in a position to help. I think being vulnerable and being, well, sensitive to all these issues that we see around us is a value, because if we weren't, we wouldn't do anything about anything. So it's good to be appreciative of that, and it's also good to be appreciative of being in a position to help, because if you're listening to this, if you're in the Western world, you're in a good position to help people and animals, and there's many people who can't, who are in poorer countries, who are who don't know where the next meal is coming from. We are so fortunate as to be able to help, and that's something to be grateful for. 9 is you're an animal too. It's very important to realize that we deserve rest and recreation too, and that we don't have to be always on the clock. We don't have to be sleeping under bridges. We don't have to be arrested all the time. We deserve a life. We deserve a nice life, a happy life, and that's a way also to be more sustainable. We also shouldn't be too hard on ourselves. I know some people are struggling with their vegan diet, and they feel disappointed in themselves when they are not as pure as somebody else is. This meme says, I'm so vegan I don't watch Kevin Bacon movies. Purity and this consistency, you can take that. I mean, this is absurd, of course, but there's people who take it very far. And I would say don't fret about being 100% consistent 100% of the time, because it's not, in the end, it's not that important. In the end, your own consumption, and certainly the details in your own consumption, are of minor importance relative to your impact on what other people eat. So what you eat is relatively unimportant compared to the impact you have on what other people eat. What other people eat, there's many people you can reach with your communication, and also with your money, by the way, and your donations and your free time. So focusing on the details is very, I think, unimportant. And number 10 is we're winning. I think definitely we're winning. This is a graph that shows, maybe some of you have seen it, a graph that shows the budgets, the advertising budgets of the big food companies in the US. And in green, bottom left, you have the total budgets, the organizational budget of the biggest animal rights organizations. And you see the disproportion, right? So the total budget in green of the whole organizations, and the advertising budgets of some of the biggest companies. So this is very disproportionate. And if it's like this, that the big companies are putting so much money into convincing people to eat meat and to eat more meat and animal products, if they do that, and they are doing that, and still meat consumption is not growing, it's stagnating, then it means that we're winning. Because imagine if they didn't have all this money, and imagine if we had more money, we would go much faster. And I think, there's no way of knowing this, but I'm pretty sure that the situation would be much worse without the animal rights vegan movement. And I have very good hopes that this will completely change the situation, and that there will be a time in I don't know how many years when we look back on this period and we say oh my God, how was this possible that we did this to animals? How could we eat them? And there will be people will write PhDs and books to just try to answer the question why and how it was possible. They will just not understand. I'm very sure of that. And that will happen because of different factors, because of technological revolutions, because of environmental pressure, because of rising compassion, because of all these things together. And I think we have to appreciate all these things together, all these different factors, and not be too rushed and too desperate that people are not right away going vegan for the animals. I think we have to be patient. Some people say we cannot allow ourselves to be patient. We cannot. The animals are dying, but I think we cannot allow ourselves not to be patient. We have to be patient if we want to do this for the long term. If we want to do it, if we want to reach this aim, this very high objective that we set ourselves, we have to be in it for the long game, and we have to do it with a little bit of patience. That's what I have to say. Thanks for listening. I'm just gonna let my cat out of the door before she pees. 1 second.
Well, thank you, Tobias. Thank you for that wonderful presentation. And was very inspiring to me. I also, and this is Lisa speaking, I'm also helping to moderate this discussion. So at this point, Tobias, if you're open to it, we can have some Q&A time with some of the participants and see if you might be interested. So what I'll ask of you, if you're a participant, and we're just so grateful that you're here tonight, just to be able to experience Tobias. I know he travels around the world and does speaking, and this is my first time actually hearing him speak, and I'm just so delighted to hear it. And if you would like to, if you have a question, you can either participate in the chat box by asking your question, and I'll try to moderate that. And if you'd like to, also you can unmute yourself and even join on your webcam. What we'll do is ask, if you do have a lot of background noise, if you can keep your microphone muted when you're not asking a question. But this is a wonderful opportunity for all of us to really be together and be able to ask Tobias some of our questions we've had. So what I'll do here is I'm just going to slightly change the view on your screen so you'll be able to see anyone else who is also wanting to speak. Okay. So I'm wondering, we've got see if we have some questions in the chat box here. So Christine said she had a question from point number 7. So Christine, you're welcome to ask that. And folks are saying it was a really great presentation, really excited about that, and even saying they're very grateful to you, Tobias, for giving us this huge opportunity to be more strategic in our activism, and that you're doing really important work. Great. Let's see. Is there somebody? If you'd like to speak, can you just say your name? Let's see. Let's try this another way. How about? So, just wondering. I don't know if Jenny, if you joined us, if you have a question. You do. Would you like to ask a...
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
I can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I was listening on the phone and could not unmute myself or somehow join through the phone, so I popped into the camera version. Hello, and thank you so much. I'm curious about your research. Have you done any looking into the persuasion tactic of, for lack of a better word, shame, or the aspect, not necessarily that someone would go vegan because they've become suddenly compassionate towards animals, but maybe the disgust factor or the shame factor that you were just recently referring to, maybe in 50 years looking back, how were we eating animals, but not out of compassion, but out of shame or disgust? Have you looked at that at all?
Well, the different things, disgust and shame. I mean, disgust can be like, moral disgust, or it can be physical disgust. And shame is like more, I think in relationship with other people, that we are ashamed of what we're doing. I think right now, I think that can work. But I mean, one of the things I'm saying often, and I haven't said it here, is that what works and what doesn't work is very much dependent on the time of the history of the movement, like what time, what evolution, what period your movement is in. And I think some things that don't work today may work tomorrow or may work in 20 years. And I see some things being done today that I think, like, this is not working today. This will work later, but don't do it today yet. And I think what I see, or what I think is the case, is that how confrontational you can be towards people, and shaming would be a way of like being confrontational. How confrontational you can be towards people depends very much, or is like correlating to the public support of something. So for instance, if you have something like Cecil the Lion, or somebody abusing cats on the internet, the whole world is against those people, and you can shame them, and you can let everything go. You can knock yourself out shaming them, and it's all fine because the whole world is with you. But if you look at things that the public support is much lower for, like meat eating, for instance, there's only 5% of the people with us, let's say. Then shaming is of course very difficult because 95% of the people is with the people that we are shaming. So I think it's not going to work at that point. It can work when the public support is much bigger. And for instance, you can see some things like, for instance, foie gras, like the fat liver, the fat duck liver. That's something that not many people eat because it's expensive, and it's like a luxury product. So for that, shaming could be, I mean, I'm not very much in favor of shaming in general, but you could be like more cynical, let's say, more sarcastic about things like that, about people who eat that, because there's much more public support and way less people doing that. Just like with fur, but even with fur coats, it still doesn't work. I mean, we have like 75% of people agreeing that fur is bad, and only a few people wearing fur coats, but they're still doing it. And we have tried to shame them, I think, and they're still being shamed, and it doesn't really work. So I don't think it's the best strategy, but I think as we go along, it probably at a certain point when most people are on board, it will work to like get like the people who are the laggards, to get them also on board, like to just say like, this is immoral, you should be. I mean, shaming of course is like, of course you can do it to different degrees. I mean, if you say like, this is immoral, you're already saying to people that you're being a bad person. But you can say like, how could you, and you're disgusting, etc. So there's different gradations in it. So I hope that's a bit of an answer to your question.
Yeah, have you looked at all about people who are religious and who are, the shame that the religion actually proposes in breaking the commandments and that sort of thing?
Yeah, I don't do research myself. Religion is something, I mean, I'm very interested in religion, but I haven't really studied it with relation to like veganism or animal rights much, mainly because here in Western Europe, we're not very religious anymore. So I think it would make sense to study that much deeper in the US, because people are quite religious, or many people are religious there, and I think the animal rights movement, the vegan movement is mainly very liberal and doesn't care that much about religion, and I think it's our loss if we ignore it entirely.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you.
Thanks.
So just wondering if anyone else has any questions. If you'd like, if you are in your webcam, you're welcome to answer them or ask them. And we do have a couple of people who have just contributed in the chat box. So I'll share a couple of those, Tobias, unless anybody has another question. One of them is, what is your opinion of the effectiveness of the Pig Save movement, of demonstrating outside the slaughterhouses and doing more of a vigil? And they have like save movements around the world.
Yeah. To me, that looks good at first sight. I mean, I think it's something that's non-violent. It's something that like shows compassion. It's something that like it is. I think it's one of the better ways of direct action. Like, I'm not in favor very much of like going to a Whole Foods and protesting there like DXC does, but like direct action in terms of like being very openly where the slaughterhouses are and trying to show what's happening there. I think that can definitely work. One thing, of course, is that like, I mean, talking about shaming, other people will try to shame those people often, and they will say like, oh, pussies and sissies and they're like crying about an animal, etc. So that's an effect that you have. That's like it's a very defensive effect, I think. So I think it would be good if we can to like try to be careful about coming over as credible as possible when we do that. And credible means like, well, we don't use violence. We're not overly emotional. I mean, it's kind of, doesn't sound very nice to say this, because of course we're going to be emotional when we're standing there, but if we give the impression of like being too emotional, I think that a lot of people like are turned off by that. So some kind of like rational speech or something, I think that it will be interesting to I mean, these are just my gut feelings, to put that in there. Yeah, so I think I like those actions, and I think this is one of the things also that will be more and more prevalent in the future, I think, and more productive and successful as we go along. There will be a time when people can do that, and when everybody will say like, yes, of course. Just like, I mean, when there's like, it depends on the animal. I mean, if you look at what Sea Shepherd does, that's like direct action, very confrontational, even more so than, I mean, much more so than vigils, and people accept it. And the main reason for that is that we don't eat whales. It does have a lot of public support. If you would do what Paul Watson does on land with a slaughterhouse, I mean, there wouldn't be the public support that he has with Sea Shepherd. So, but as this public support grows, we can be more and more explicit, we can be more and more direct, we can be more and more radical, confrontational, etc.
Thank you, Tobias. That's really helpful. Another question here, that we can have some pretty big blind spots, and do you have any suggestions for how can we help hold each other accountable for keeping the strategic perspective when we are or we see others who are reacting out of a personal need, such as outrage, without triggering a defensive reaction? So,
yeah, good question. That's not easy. In fact, it's very difficult. And my experience is that, like, I mean, talking to omnivores is sometimes not more difficult than talking to vegans that you differ in opinion with. So it's sensitive in both cases. And if we want to explain to somebody like, okay, this is not a very effective thing to do, I mean, emotions are so high, and we have to kind of like respect these emotions and respect that people are so triggered and so touched by what they're seeing and what they're witnessing. And I think we have to just be basically very patient with it, just like we have to be patient with omnivores. It's a bit the same mechanism. I mean, my work is about that. It's about like trying to like make people like more effective, think not from dogma but from effectiveness, and it's a big work in itself. And I think we're a young movement. We're full of like people who are very fiery and radical, and some people would say fundamentalist, and we're learning. And I think as a whole, as a movement, we all have like, and especially organizations have like a responsibility to help other people, to help educate activists. So not only, of course, that's why we're here too, not only meat eaters have to be educated, but activists too. I mean, to keep the compassion there, to keep effectiveness there, good communication, etc. And I'm very hopeful in that respect, because there's a lot of talk about pragmatism, effectiveness, empathy, etc. in our activism these days, and we're getting much more professional than we used to be. So I think this is a matter of time. I mean, we'll always have like people who are really emotional about these things, but I think that like as we have more and more information in our literature, in our talks, in our conferences, about effective activism, about not losing ourselves in our emotions, and trying to focus on what we need to focus on, that this is like a culture that will spread also, or that is spreading in our advocacy and in the community of animal advocates. So I'm pretty hopeful that this is going in the wrong direction. As to like what you would say, or how you would react, I mean, I would do it a lot of times the same as I would like react to a meat eater that I'm not agreeing with. not always like go for the direct confrontation, but give them something like to read, or give them a link that they can read later. When the heat is not there, when the emotions are lower, then they can take some time to study a bit. And often it's not a good idea to like talk about these things like in the heat of the moment, because like I said, emotions are very high. So my favorite strategy when I try to like give people some information is to give them something to read. I mean, to talk about it briefly and then let it go and say like, this here contains more information, because you're not face to face then, and people don't have to be defensive. They're just reading it in the privacy of their own room, and they don't have to like be defensive against you who's saying something. They're just reading some information. So I think that works for activists as well.
Thank you, Tobias. And again, I just invite anybody who would like to ask a question. If you can join us via your webinar, your webcam. Also, there's a few in the chat box as well. So
yeah, I have a question. I'll ask through
sure.
camera, because it was going to be too much to write. So I was curious, on what are you basing the statement you made that we are winning? I don't know about all the data, but some things I'm pretty sure I'm aware of is that meat consumption in the US, that red meat has dipped a little, but poultry is actually on the rise. That developing countries that are becoming more wealthy, meat consumption is going way up there, and that generally the percentage of the population globally that is vegan or vegetarian has been static for decades, maybe.
Yeah.
And yet this is despite all these things getting more attention than they ever have, that you mentioned, like the environment, having more affordable meat substitutes. And based on all that, you would think we would see big drops, but we're not. So I was just curious why you think we are winning.
Yeah. Well, I've explained like why we're not seeing big drops. That was the first or the third point, right? Like why it's such a big challenge that it's going to be slow. But and what you're saying about the global situation is definitely right. So globally, we're not winning. I mean, globally, more and more animals are being eaten, and that's something that I think for now is unavoidable. Is an evolution. It's going to like get a bit worse before it gets better, I think. As to what you're saying about the numbers, it's very hard to get to the right numbers, because there's so many different parameters. Like you can look at it in terms of like in terms of number of lives, number of chickens killed, and then if you look at it like that, indeed there's more chickens being killed. So and when people switch from cows to chickens, then we kill more animals and we make more animals suffer. So that's not a very good thing. But so the statistics say that, I mean, there was a statistic saying that in the last 5 years it's gone down, meat consumption, and then it's gone back up again. But it's not because people eat more meat, but it has to do with something with export. I can look it up how it is. It's a bit complicated, but in general, I think what most people are complaining about who say we're not winning is the amount of chickens that we're eating. And there's some people who say that, well, for every time that we say that beef is bad and people eat more chicken, that's really a loss. Now, I don't think, I think we have to look at it a bit on the longer term, and we have to see that every time people change something in their eating habits and some vegetarian vegan products are included, that's the most important win. Because what we have to do is to make as many people as possible cross a certain threshold. A lot of people think like, this is not tasty, this is not doable, I don't want to eat this. As soon as they do eat it, that's a very important threshold. And even if they eat a little bit more chicken, because they've replaced beef by chicken, but if they replaced also beef by maybe one vegan meal in 2 weeks or one vegetarian meal in 2 weeks, I think that's already a win. And I think that it's especially the meat reducers that are, like I said, are so important, and that's where you see definitely an increase in the number of meat reducers. So I think about 30-40% of people sometimes call themselves meat reducers, and so that's, I think, a very important statistic, also because these meat reducers are very, spread among the population. So they bring a lot of other people in touch with it. They confront a lot of businesses with it. So they really drive the demand. So that's one important thing. And the other thing that I think is an indicator of that we are winning, and it's not like proof or it's not happening yet, but one very important thing is that if you look at all those new startups especially in California, that are developing the ideal meat or dairy substitute, they're working with, like, for the very first time, with really big money. So I did a quick calculation, and in the last 5 years, I think they gathered $350 million. And I think that's a couple of times more than the whole budget of the animal rights movement combined. That's money, that's new money. It's never been there before. And first of all, it's money that in a sense is part of the movement now. And it also shows that, like, there's people really believing in this. There's people investing, people like Bill Gates and richest people in the world, really good and smart investors, investing in these things. It's a sign of, I think, of the coming times, that it's going to radically change. And I'm very, when I say we're winning, it's partly it's numbers and it's partly wishful thinking, or like motivational thinking, let's say. But I think there are very good indicators to say that things are really changing. And but it's true, if you look at merely at the numbers, it's not always easy to see that.
Thanks for clarifying that, Tobias. I'm wondering, there's also a question here about, so we focus a lot on changing people's habits with eating and food. What about changing their habits that have to do with what we use and not necessarily what we eat, such as perfumes and soaps and shampoos?
Yeah.
And yeah.
Yeah. So my work is about food. It's about diet. The other things are not unimportant, of course, but first of all, if you look at the proportions, 99% of the 99 point whatever percent of the animals that we kill and let suffer, we do that for food reasons. So the other part is comparatively small. And secondly, I think once we get the food right, the rest will follow. So I'm most concerned about food, and I think that's where our focus should be. On the other hand, I think some issues can be like gateways into the bigger picture. So, for instance, if you talk about, if you can show people the suffering of animals in circuses or the suffering for cosmetics, and show something that they can like really accept, because maybe they're not like that involved in it as they are in meat eating. For instance, foie gras or fur coats or something. The suffering of those animals can create empathy that can flow over to the other domain. So I think it's definitely also useful, and we should not neglect it. But my main focus and investment is with food, because food is also the most intimate thing you can do with an animal. You eat it, it becomes part of your body. If you change that, I think the rest is easier in comparison.
Thank you. And there's another question here about the farm sanctuaries. So what do you think the positive impact of farmed animal sanctuaries is, and how important are they to the success of the movement?
Yeah. So some people, especially the people that are really focusing heavily on effectiveness, believe that farm sanctuaries are not like that effective and that important. I would say there's different factors. I'd say like it is of course important, and it can be very powerful to get people in touch live with an animal that they like normally eating, that they had no idea how that animal is like. So I mean, I was a vegan for many years before I was at Farm Sanctuary in New York, and even I was really amazed at, for instance, at the sheep, like how they seem to have personality and came up to me and wanted to be cuddled, etc. So that's really powerful. But of course, you can only allow a certain number of people to get acquainted with these animals, and then a big number of people going there are vegans already, I'm sure. So there is a matter of like return on investment, and like how much it's going to cost, and how many people are we reaching. So one thing that's very important, I think, is to make use of your farm sanctuary to put the word out, to have a Facebook page or a website where you can really like show the videos that you're making on your sanctuary, because then you're reaching a lot more people. And secondly, I'd say like maybe we don't need like in a way, we need an endless, infinite number of farm sanctuaries because it's so many animals. But on the other hand, in terms of effectiveness, maybe we don't, in the sense that like if there's like a sanctuary in every region, let's say, like within a couple of hours drive, maybe we don't need another one in that same region, and then we can focus on other things. Or in a small country, we may be sufficient, like in Belgium, there could be one, and the first one is the most important one, and then the added gain with the second and the third one is much smaller. So I'm definitely not against sanctuaries. I think they're wonderful. But what could be an objection is that like people often let their emotions speak, and they will sponsor sanctuaries. I mean, they need a lot of money, but there may be more efficient things or effective things to donate to, and that's the whole reasoning within the effective altruist movement, and the reasoning of animal charity evaluators, etc. That some things are just deliver more bang for your buck.
Mm-hmm. Okay, fair enough. So we also had a question from Christine, who was asking that how do you keep a positive outlook? I mean, how is it that you look at some of the things going on, and focusing on the good and positive in people, even when the negative feelings pop out sometimes? How do you keep that positive outlook for yourself?
Yeah. Several things. First of all, I think it's something that is learned. I mean, you can train it. You can say again and again, let me focus on the positive, not on the negative. I used to be not like this. I used to be more negative person. At some point, I don't know why it switched. So I think it was a conscious effort. It was a conscious effort because I said, like, this is probably better for myself and for others if I like focus on the positive. And also, I mean, I'm basically very tolerant of other people's mistakes, I think, in the sense that like I can it's not difficult for me to like think of that people may have a problem, that they have like had like some bad experience or somewhere. I mean, basically I think it's very hard to fault and to make people entirely responsible for what they're doing wrong. And it's like a big dilemma in philosophy, like how much to what extent people have free will, etc. But in my feeling, like people are determined to a very high degree in doing what they're doing, and so I'm very prone to be lenient and to give them a big break and a lot of leeway. And I think a very nice saying is those who we think deserve love the least need it the most. So people who are in trouble and who do bad things because of that, they need our support the most, and we give it the least to them. And that's actually, I mean, we put them in jail, and we do things to them that will never heal them. And you can see the same things on another scale with meat eating. If we see all this misery around us and all these people like doing horrible things to animals. Well, we can judge them for that. First of all, it's not going to help. It's not going to help us also. And we could say, like, I mean, these people are probably in pain somewhere themselves. They probably don't like to do this. I mean, and if they're psychopaths, then they can't help that either. They're psychopaths. Yeah, I mean, I think basically if you just think about it, if you think rationally about it, you can come to a lot of understanding. And you can realize that, yeah, people don't have it all under their control. And you can realize that people will change quicker if we are more supportive of them rather than judging them. So that's just an effectiveness reasoning that helps me to focus on the positive.
Well, thank you so much, Tobias, for answering those questions. And I don't know if anyone has a last question for Tobias. We're so grateful to you for being with us. I know due to the time differences here, it's quite late in the evening for Tobias. So I really appreciate staying awake this long in order to speak with us today. And I think it's been really just rewarding for me. I've learned so much during our talk today. So perhaps, unless anyone has a last little question or something they'd like to chat about, I will mention that this, let's see, there was one that maybe, perhaps technology might play some sort of role in the convenience part of the apathy. So that's something that was part of the online discussion here. But I wanted to let everyone know that we do these online webinars every month, and they're usually the first Thursday of the month. We try to bring in a different speaker with unique ideas to help to bring them to our movement, so we can have these discussions and really help to identify what each one of us finds most engaging in activism, and also to find ways to be an activist and also have it be sustainable in the long term, ways to promote self-care. And I think the title of this webinar, Have a Little Patience, is really important. And some of the mention of gratitude and some of these other attributes, which really helps us to stay tuned in as a movement and also to stay uplifted. As you mentioned, Tobias, with looking at empathy versus compassion, being able to have compassion and then keep ourselves feeling good, enjoying our lives while we're doing this really incredible, profound work for the animal. So yes, and one other thing Christine just posted on the chat box, which is so important, and that is, Tobias, your blog, veganstrategist.com. So if you like what you've been hearing, you want to, excuse me? And yes, thank you. It's .org. Oops, yep, she corrected it. Sorry about that. Veganstrategist.org. And that is just to stay tuned, because Tobias sends out these really amazing blogs, and I enjoy reading them. I think that they're bringing new information to our movement and new ways of thinking, and it's super helpful. So it's really an honor to have you here this evening. And for anybody who's interested, yay! We're also in line with this idea of sustainable activism. We're in Defense of Animals, we call February Activist Appreciation Month, and we're going to be hosting a summit, which is a free online conference, and it's going to be called Hope for Animals. So stay tuned. We'll have the sign-up details, and we'll have each week we're going to be having different speakers who will be speaking directly about different types of animal activism. So thank you to Tobias, and thanks to everyone for joining us this evening. It's lovely to see your faces and to read in the chat box, and that's why we're doing this. We're having this so that we can really communicate with one another and discuss these really vital and important ideas within the movement. So thanks to everyone for joining us, and we hope that you'll stay tuned. You'll probably get a reminder next month about our next Sustainable Activism webinar, so we hope you'll join us again then. Have a wonderful evening, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Tobias.
Thank you, Tobias.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.